Have you ever wondered what the deep forests hide, why in their depths people get lost, hear strange sounds, or see things that cannot be explained? These are not just scary fairy tales or horror movie fiction. Real stories of mystical encounters in the woods still happen today. By the end of this video, you'll know what mysteries these places hold and why people come back from there different, or not at all. Don't be in a hurry to switch. What you'll hear may turn your view of the world upside down. First, we'll tell you real cases that will give you goosebumps, and then we'll break down what experts and eyewitnesses think about it. We're sure you'll want to share it with your friends. Forests have always caused fear and attraction for humans at the same time. Since ancient times, people have believed that it is the dwelling place of spirits, magical creatures, and evil forces. But why exactly have forests become such a magnet for mysterious stories? When Sergei went into the forest, he was an experienced hunter. He knew the territory well, always took a map, a compass, and a sufficient supply of provisions. But this time something went wrong. According to him, he had been following game for several hours when suddenly the forest around him changed. It was as if I was in a different place, he recalled. The trees became taller, strange, as if crooked, and that light, it was greenish, soft, but it gave such a sense of unease. Sergei heard someone calling his name. He was sure it was the voice of a friend who was supposed to be home. It was confusing. The voice sounded closer, but when he tried to walk towards it, everything seemed to go back to the same place. When he was found, he said he saw figures, tall with long arms and faces that seemed stretched out like masks. The legend of the Lesh is not just a myth. Locals believe that such creatures deliberately confuse people so that they don't find their way back. Sergei told me that he had lost his sense of time. It seemed to him that a couple of hours had passed, even though he had been away for a week. How is that possible? The forest seemed to play with him, immersing him in its own rhythm, where time flows differently. Similar cases were described by other travelers. For example, one account of the Peruvian Amazon tells of a man who entered a grove of sacred trees. He thought he had walked there for only a couple of minutes, but when he returned, it appeared that 3 days had passed. Psychologists suggest that in extreme conditions, people can lose their sense of time due to stress and fear. But those who have been in similar situations assure it is something more. They felt like they were in another dimension. There are similar stories in different countries. In the Japanese forest, for example, there are stories of yurei spirits that lure people into the thicket, where they disappear without a trace. In the United States, there is a famous case in Sequoia National Park. A woman reported seeing a giant shadow man who followed her. The forest is a place full of mystery, and sounds play a key role in it. Those who have experienced strange events in the forest often talk about sounds that cannot be explained. For example, human-like screams in the night, or whispers that can be heard all around, although no one is around. In Poland in 2019, a group of students went for a walk in Białowieża forest. At one point, they heard bells ringing. The sound came from far away, but it seemed to be close at the same time. They went to the sound, but could not find its source. Later, they learned that there is a legend of dancing spirits in this place, who lure people into traps with the help of bells. The forests of Russia are also full of similar stories. In the forests of Siberia, it is said that sometimes the laughter of children can be heard. Science explains it by the play of the wind. But those who have heard it with their own ears are sure it is more than that. Scientific studies show that some forests may have areas of increased electromagnetic activity. This is due to underground metal deposits, magnetic anomalies, or geological features. High levels of electromagnetic radiation can affect the human brain. People begin to see strange figures, experience feelings of fear,
and feel as if they are being watched. This can explain many of the encounters with ghosts or spirits. However, these explanations do not always satisfy those who have experienced such events. For example, in 2013, a group of researchers measured magnetic waves in the Ural forests. One of the expedition members claimed to have seen a silhouette standing behind the trees. He was sure that it was not a hallucination.
Tourists from Kiev traveled to the Carpathians to explore little-known trails. The first night they camped near a river. During the night they heard voices that resembled children's voices. The voices were calling for help and crying, but they never found the source of the sound. One of the participants, a young guy named Alexei, decided to go outside the camp. He said that the voice sounded somehow special, as if it was addressed only to him. In the morning he was found 5 kilometers from the camp, without shoes, with scratches on his hands and face. I was following a girl in a white dress, he later recounted. She ran ahead and called out to me, but suddenly I felt it was a trap. I turned around, and at that moment, everything disappeared. Vyavki are spirits that Slavs represented as entities living in the forests. They can look like ordinary people or take the form of children, animals. Legend has it that they appear at night to lure people into dangerous places. In 2021 in Belarus, a family walking in the woods reported seeing a girl standing by a tree. She didn't speak, just stared at them. When they got closer, she disappeared. They later learned that the locals had seen Vyavaks in this place. Legends of such creatures are a warning. The forest does not tolerate carelessness, and whoever enters it must respect its rules. When a tour group in the Carpathian Mountains heard the voices of children, their reactions were mixed. Some were frightened, others thought it was a hoax or a strange echo effect. However, the sound was too clear to be an illusion. The voices sounded like someone was calling for help, one participant recounted, but there was complete darkness all around, and we couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Locals claim that this is a typical manifestation of nature spirits, or Wijawaks. They appear to lure people to dangerous places, such as cliffs, swamps, or deep woods from which there is no escape. It is important to understand, if you hear such sounds, it is better to stay where you are and not be tempted to explore their source. It is interesting that different cultures have similar descriptions. In Ireland, for example, there are legends about banshees, whose calls can also lead travelers into the unknown. The story of Jack Whitman, a Canadian logger, took place in 1965. He was working on a site near a small town in British Columbia. On his way back to camp in the evening, Jack noticed a figure in the distance. It was a woman in a long white dress. She stood motionless, as if waiting for him. Jack could not believe his eyes. He shouted to her, but she didn't answer. When he came closer, the woman had simply disappeared. Later, he found an old, overgrown grave with a barely legible inscription on the spot. Locals explained the phenomenon by saying that a young woman had died here in the 19th century, whose body was never found. Many loggers claim to have seen her ghost. Those who have encountered the unexplained in the forests have returned changed. One such case occurred with a geological expedition in the Urals. In 1980, a group of researchers were taking measurements in remote areas. One of the participants, Andrei, suddenly disappeared for 24 hours. The whole camp searched for him, but he was found only 24 hours later, sitting by a tree and staring at one point. Andrei could not remember what had happened to him. He spoke of strange sounds as if a whisper, and that he felt someone's gaze. After this incident, his character changed. He became withdrawn and began to be afraid of forests. Psychologists call it post-traumatic stress disorder. However, the locals believe that he met something in the forest that left its mark on him. Slavic legends about forest spirits have deep roots. Leshy, mermaids, Vyavki, All these creatures were part of our ancestors' lives. The forest for them was home and a source of resources, but also a place where there are forces that can be displeased with human presence. For example, if someone chopped down a tree without permission, it was believed that a leshy could lead them astray in the forest. Mermaids, according to legends, could lure lonely travelers with their singing. These stories were not only frightening, but also taught respect for nature. Today, the forest is no longer a mysterious place for most of us, but the legends still live on. They remind us that nature is a force to be reckoned with.
Modern research confirms that forests can affect humans on many levels. First, dense forests change the lighting and acoustics, which can make people feel anxious. Second, some trees release substances that affect our emotional state. In addition, forests often contain areas with unusual geophysical characteristics, underground faults, quartz accumulations, or magnetic anomalies. These places can evoke strange feelings in a person, which can easily be mistaken for mysticism, but there is a deeper point of view. The forest is a kind of memory of nature. Trees memorize everything that happens around them. For example, scientists have proved that the shape of tree rings can tell about climate, cataclysms, and other events that took place centuries ago. Perhaps forests really do hold more secrets than we can imagine. Modern research has shown that trees and forests are not just plants. They store information about the past, like living archives of nature. Scientists have found that rings on tree slices can tell us about decades or even centuries of natural disasters, climatic changes, and other significant events. For example, in the Krasnoyarsk region were found trees whose rings indicated strong radiation emissions in 1908. It is associated with the Tunguska explosion. These trees literally imprinted in themselves the consequences of the catastrophe. But what if forests not only record, but also remember? Some scientists suggest that trees can transmit signals to each other through their root systems. This phenomenon is called the mushroom internet, or mycorrhizal network. If trees can communicate, then perhaps they can also respond to human presence. Mystics believe that forests have a collective consciousness, which explains why, deep within them, humans feel like strangers or have unexplained feelings. Forests have always been more than just a collection of trees for people. It is a place where nature shows its power, where time seems to slow down and silence becomes louder than the usual noise. But what exactly is it that makes us return there again and again, even if deep down we dread it? There are several reasons why people feel drawn to forests. 1. A deep connection to nature. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors lived in forests. They hid there from predators, found food, and built their first dwellings. The forest was both a refuge and a source of everything necessary for survival. This connection to nature has remained in our DNA, although modern man often forgets about it. When we enter the forest, we intuitively feel this connection. The oxygenated air, the rustling of the leaves, the smell of the earth, all of this awakens in us a sense of home that is hard to explain in words. Even those who have never lived near nature say that a walk in the forest gives a sense of peace and tranquility. 2. Attractive unknown. The forest is a space of mystery. Roads can disappear, leaving us alone with our own instincts. The shadows of trees sometimes seem alive, and the sounds of nature take on a special power. It's a place where familiar rules lose their significance, and every step is an adventure. Psychologists believe that this unknown beckons us because it stimulates ancient survival mechanisms. Our brains seem to reboot when we leave our comfort zones and face the challenges that nature offers. 3. The forest as a symbol of freedom. The forest is often associated with freedom. There are no restrictions that cities dictate. There are no traffic signals, ringing phones, and a constant flow of information. It is the perfect place to disconnect from the hustle and bustle and feel that you belong to something bigger than yourself. Many people suffering from burnout find solace in the woods. This is no accident. Studies have shown that being in nature lowers levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and improves concentration and mood. 4. A test of the soul.
The forest not only attracts us, but also tests us. There are no familiar landmarks, and a person has to rely on his or her senses and intuition. This encounter with the unknown can be frightening, but it is in such situations that we grow and become stronger. There are cases when people went to the forest in search of answers to important life questions. For example, the famous writer Henry David Thoreau spent 2 years in solitude among the forests of Walden Pond, and this time inspired one of his most significant philosophical works. 5. Nature heals. The forest has powerful therapeutic effects. There is even a term, forest therapy, Shinrin-yoku, which originated in Japan. The essence of this practice is simple. People spend time in the forest, inhaling the aroma of trees, listening to the sounds of nature, and completely immersing themselves in the atmosphere.
The results of such walks are amazing. People feel calmer, their blood pressure decreases, and their energy levels increase. The forest not only heals the body, but also clears the mind. 6. Spiritual awakening. In many cultures, forests play the role of places of power where a person can feel connected to something higher. Shamans, monks, and hermits have sought inspiration and spiritual enlightenment in the forest for centuries. When a person enters a forest, he encounters not only nature, but also himself. The silence of the forest sharpens perception, and many people begin to ask themselves questions that they have avoided in the hustle and bustle of city life. This is why forests are often described as a place where you can hear your inner voice. Real-life example. One famous case involves a group of young people who decided to spend a week in a nature reserve in the Altai Mountains. They said that at first they were annoyed by the silence, lack of internet, and usual amenities. But by the third day, they began to notice how their perceptions were changing. We began to appreciate every little thing: the sound of the stream, the smell of pine needles, even our own fatigue from the hike. One participant recalled, when they returned home, many of them felt renewed. It was not just a vacation, but a real rebirth. One participant said, many people believe that forests are not just natural areas, but places of power, where one can restore energy or find inspiration. For example, shamans and healers have used forests for their rituals since ancient times, believing them to be a portal between the world of humans and spirits. There are dozens of such places in Russia. For example, the Drunken Forest in the Kaluga region, where trees bend into unusual shapes, or the forests of the Kola Peninsula, where anomalous phenomena such as northern lights in atypical places and strange magnetic deviations are often observed. But even without mysticism, forests do have the power to heal. Studies have shown that walking among trees reduces stress levels, improves mood, and even boosts immunity. Perhaps this is the very magical effect that legends speak of. The forest tests a person for strength. Can he endure loneliness, silence, and his own thoughts? It is in such conditions that people find inner answers to their questions. So what are the forests really hiding? Real stories of people who have encountered the unexplainable can be written off as coincidences, stress, or even imagination. But then why are these cases repeated from generation to generation in different cultures and countries? Legends of forest spirits, ghosts, and mysterious phenomena exist for a reason. It can be a way to explain things that science has not yet been able to solve. For example, why do people disappear into the woods even with GPS? Why do they hear voices that shouldn't be there? Perhaps the forest is not just a physical place, but a kind of bridge between realities that we have not yet learned to understand. Those who have encountered its mysteries often speak of their lives being changed. Some become afraid of nature. Others, on the contrary, begin to feel connected to it. And no matter how we try to explain this phenomenon, one thing remains unchanged. Forests are a mystery that we can solve only by entering their territory and opening our hearts to the mysteries of nature. If you are hooked by these stories,
Be sure to give us a like and write in the comments whether you yourself have encountered something unusual in the forest. Subscribe to the channel because there are more mysterious topics ahead. If we get 5,000 likes, I will tell you about the most mystical places in America that will not leave you indifferent. See you soon.